All right, hi everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast. I am your host, Jim Gramm, and joining me, we have a special guest. Unfortunately, Dave Sadler, my normal co-host, the Juice, at Vigilante Juice on Twitter. You guys know him; you probably have seen him around. He has a busy Wednesday. Not only does he have work today, he's going to go do his fitness today. He's going to work out at the gym, and then I believe he has his kid's dance recital, and he has to squeeze in dinner in there. So a jam-packed day for the Juice. He said, Jim, he goes, it's not looking good for me recording today. I said, don't worry, Dave. Take the week off. Enjoy time with your family. Get your fitness on. I don't want you to close everything just to do the show here for an hour. So I got my good friend, Billy Brant, for those of you who don't know, longtime listener of the show, and he accompanied me to New Jersey about a month ago, and him and I watched the fights UFC on Fox in New Jersey. Avid MMA fan, like I said, listens every week. We talk all the time about MMA. In fact, I think that's about all we talk about, Billy, when we see each other, just about. So Billy knows his stuff. I wouldn't bring him on the show if I didn't think he could handle it. But he is Mr. Billy Brant. He's going to be co-hosting Beyond the Cage this week. So say hi to everybody, Billy.
How's it going?
All right, we're getting right into it. Now, this is something you and I have been talking back and forth about, and this is the Reebok deal. Now, of course, as people know, Dave and I talked about this on the show last week. We talked about the fighter, breakdown and payouts. It goes by number of bouts and whatnot. And I guess maybe we were a little bit in the minority, but when we read it, not all these reactions had come out yet. And we thought it would be more 50-50 in terms of fighters being supportive of it and against it. But after all these reactions I've seen, Dave, and all these, or Billy, Dave's not here, all these quotes and stuff I've seen, it seems as though it's maybe more like 80-20 against the payouts. A lot of people are against this, not just fighters. We're talking about media and other pundits alike. And I want to read real quickly a quote from Joe Rogan, obviously UFC color commentator. And this is his quote. I got this from an article on MMA Junkie that was reposted on MMAmania.com. And he says, whenever you see guys complaining and talking about the difference in the amount of pay that they're getting, that's not good. Just not good. All that stuff had to be worked out. It should have been worked out, I think, before. Even the champs get 40 grand. The best guys in the world only get 40 grand. That just doesn't seem like enough to me. It just doesn't. And that comes from Joe Rogan again. And kind of looking that over and now hearing a lot of these reports, it either seems like it has to be boosted up higher, or like we kind of mentioned last week, the ability for fighters to put maybe one logo on Reebok or something, because it just doesn't seem like a lot of these guys and gals are going to make the same type of money with sponsorships that they normally would have before this deal is set to take place.
Yeah, they're for sure gonna lose a lot of money from what it looks like. Even the champions, I forget who the guy was that said he made double off one sponsor than what he's gonna get paid for Reebok. So it opens up a lot for Bellator, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of Bellator, I have a quote here from Scott Coker, and this was a repost on MMA Mania from MMA Fighting, and this is what he said. I'll tell you this, the phone's been ringing. I tell people, listen, we're not going to go engage in any kind of dialogue with you on any level unless you're a free agent. Once you're a free agent, give me a call. I feel with our fighters, this is an individual sport. The fighters in our league are going to have the ability to get their own sponsors as long as there's no excuse me. As long as there's no conflict with our corporate sponsors. That's like Miller Lite, Dave & Buster's, Monster Energy Drink. There's a couple others, but as long as it doesn't conflict with those sponsors, they're fine. They can negotiate a deal that pays them $1 million a year if they want. They're independent contractors, and they have the ability to go and make their own deals. So just looking at Scott Coker's deal, that seems a lot better of a deal and a lot more attractive deal than what the UFC is offering. And I wonder, Billy, if this was something we said when it first was announced, again, payouts hadn't been known or anything at that time, if this was the thing that led to an MMA union. And the way it's looking now that payouts have actually been announced, I actually think this is going to be a strong catalyst here in 2015. You talk about that former fighter lawsuit. A union has to be happening here in the next couple of years.
I think Nate Quarry was talking about jumping on to start it. So you're for sure going to see a lot of fighters jump on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting scenario. And to go over the payouts here, just again, just in case people hadn't seen them, your first 5 fights, you're only going to get 2,500 per fight. This is just from Reebok. 6 to 10, 5,000. 11 to 15, 10 grand. 16 to 20, 15 grand. 21 or more fights, which is a very rare category. I think that's like Gleason Tebow. 20 grand. And champions, regardless of how many fights they will have, gets 40 grand. And then if you challenge for a title, again, regardless of how many fights, you will receive 30. Now, that does not include any type of exclusive Reebok deal that you may or may not have, which, as of right now, includes top athletes such as Conor McGregor, Paige Van Zandt, and Ronda Rousey. So, obviously, they're going to get a separate chunk of money from Reebok themselves. We don't know what those amounts are, but obviously, they're going to be a lot higher. Now, Billy, the reason I think this is interesting is because don't you think the UFC is also losing out on money too? If you really look at it, because weren't they getting $100,000 roughly per sponsor anyway, and now they're not getting that tax, and all the money that Reebok is giving the UFC is going directly to the fighters? So actually, if you kind of look at this whole thing, wouldn't the UFC also kind of be losing out on money?
I want to imagine that, but I just don't think so. I don't think they would sign that deal if they were losing any money. There has to be something more. Maybe it's through like uniform purchases in the future they were hoping, or something along those lines. But I just don't see them doing it losing money.
I think maybe initially there might be a loss in some money,
Yeah.
but I think we don't know the percentage they're getting from sales of Reebok Reebok
Yeah.
UFC merchandise, and that's what they're banking on making them the money.
It has to be something along those lines.
So, looking at an article here from Bleacher Report, they're kind of talking about winners and losers here for this Reebok deal. And they mentioned obviously the UFC is a winner, a loser, obviously many main card fighters. Kind of looking over here. Let's look at here. Let's look at someone like Brandon Thatch. They kind of look at Brandon Thatch as of right now has under 5 UFC fights. So he would be making $25,000 in sponsorship money. Let's not forget, Brandon Thatch is coming off his last fight, a main event. And I guarantee if you're a main event fighter, regardless of whether you really try for sponsors or not, I think you can make more than $2,500 in sponsorships.
Yeah.
I think you can make that off of one sponsor. And you can have, 5 or 6, on your shirt and shorts and hat and all that stuff. Fight. So, yeah, definitely, I think that starting amount is really low. I think the other amounts aren't that bad. Kind of that middle tier section I don't think is that bad. But definitely to start out, let's say you're only making 5 and 5, 5 to show, 5 to win, and then you get, 2,500, and the UFC says, oh, your first flight's in, like this past weekend in Australia, and you live here in the United States, and you got to pay to fly all the way to Australia, you're losing money.
I think the minimum should be 10. You should enter at least 10.
Yeah, they got to work some things out, and the interesting thing to me is the fact that they released this information. To be honest, because the UFC is a private company, Reebok is a private company. This deal is just between Reebok giving money to fighters. They technically didn't have to release this information to us, the public. Now, if a fighter goes ahead and says what the breakdown is, that's completely different. But we got like a direct source about money. And this is the first time probably ever that we can really see sponsorship fees being discussed kind of openly and publicly. And I think people and fans are starting to kind of get their eyes open to how much guys are potentially losing.
Yeah. Like I said, Bellator won the most off this deal.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. I mean, you kind of look at a guy like Phil Davis, who just recently signed. Regardless why he got cut, Phil Davis may now turn out to be a genius because I think he could very easily become the Bellator light heavyweight champion.
Mm-hmm.
And you add that in, and you also not even just from a fighter standpoint. I wonder how many just actual companies are going to be calling Bellator to be sponsors. on the cage and stuff.
Yeah, it only takes a few elite fighters to go over too before I think a lot more will. Phil Davis was a big one.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but I wanted to discuss more about this deal now that more people have come out kind of against it. But again, we'll see how everything officially works starting here. We got about what, 2 months?
Yeah,
A little under 2 months. But I guess the first big event will be the International Fight Week with McGregor Aldo. That will be like the first event of Reebok, and it will be interesting to see, I guess, from kind of that weekend, because there's going to be a lot of stuff bought that weekend, with the Fan Expo and stuff.
Is that when they reveal what they actually look like, the uniform?
I think so. And of course, I've seen a couple of clothing companies that are normally go to the Fan Expo because of this deal with Reebok. Reebok will be the only apparel company at the Fan Expo this year.
Yes, I don't know how that's good.
So
they have to be paying a lot.
The UFC obviously makes money off of vendors coming into their expo, and now basically they're cutting out, I would imagine, maybe half of the people that get booths at the expo. I wonder how much, they have to cut the amount to get a booth, or I wonder what other companies are going to fill it. Because if you're a company, let's say like Head Rush or Hayabusa, you no longer can have a booth there.
Yeah, it's I don't know what to say. It's not good.
All right, well, let's get off of Reebok here. Let's move on to some fights. This weekend, obviously, there's a UFC fight, but maybe you forgot about Bellator. Bellator will hold their 137th event this Friday at the Pechanga Resort and Casino, and that's in Temecula, California. Two big fights are on the card is what I'm really looking at here. The co-main event, bantamweight division, former bantamweight champion Eduardo Dantes takes on Mike Richman. That should be an exciting fight. And then the main event for Bellator's middleweight title, Brandon Halsey against former Ultimate Fighter winner Kendall Grove. I want to start first with this matchup at bantamweight. Now, reports have come out that Mike Richman turned down a title shot after knocking out Nam Phan in the first round. And honestly, I don't think it's that big a deal, because I think Eduardo Dantes, regardless whether having a title or not, I think is one of the top bantamweights in the world. And I think Mike Richman wanted to fight Eduardo Dantes. I just think Eduardo Dantes is a really good guy. And I think if Mike Richman maybe mentally is like, all right, if I can get by a guy like Eduardo Dantes, I can beat Joe Warren, I can beat Rafael Silva, I can beat Marcus Galvo, I can beat anybody in this division if I can beat Eduardo Dantes. And I think he kind of wanted that measuring stick, that personal measuring stick, because if you really look at his bantamweight tenure, he's had 2 fights, 2 first-round knockouts. It's not like he's had a length of time to really test to see how that weight cut works. And, well, I guess he could knock out Dantes in the first round, but chances are this is a guy he's probably going to go 15 minutes with.
Yeah.
And to me, this is a true test whether or not 135 is the right division for him. So I kind of give him a little bit of an applause for taking this fight rather than, kind of taking a fight against Marcus Galvo for the title, 25 minutes, not knowing if he could do that at 135 pounds.
Yeah, it's smart, but I feel like you always just go for it, man. In case any fluke accident in this fight or something, who knows? Yeah, you always take that title shot. They don't come too often.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I guess if this was the UFC, I would say take it.
That's true, too. That's the difference.
But in Bellator, you can maybe kind of have, a little bit of leeway there. And, excuse me. Like I said, it might have been the allure of taking on Eduardo Dantes. I know the guy's not their champion right now, but he's pretty darn close. He was their champion for a very long time, so that might just be a matchup he just wanted. Maybe that was more attractive to him than fighting Marcus Galvo. I don't know. But just semantics aside, what do you think of the fight, Billy? Do you think this is going to be, a 15-minute fight, kind of, a slugfest, or do you think that maybe, we see a different side of Dantes, not maybe risking, the power of Richmond, and maybe we see more, a jiu-jitsu-based Dantes in this fight?
Yeah, I think it's hard because he wants to go the distance, like you said. If you're going to take it, test yourself, see where you can go. you can't go too. You gotta play it sort of safe. I mean, you always go for the kill, but you don't want to risk that title shot. You know it's right there. So I think it's gonna turn to a slugfest.
I think it's stylistically, I think it has all the makings of that. Richmond has that great power, and Eduardo Dantes. The interesting thing will be how can Richmond deal with the kicks of Dantes. We know Richmond has excellent boxing, obviously excellent power, but how can he deal with the kicks and the kind of the length? I mean, Dantes is a really big bantamweight. We're talking about a guy that's 5'9", 5'10". Yeah. You know, this is not a real little bantamweight. So that to me is the interesting thing. How can Richmond deal with the range and height of Dantes, and how can he deal with the kicks? And those are the two things I'll kind of be looking for in this fight. If he can handle both those things, Mike Richmond will probably walk away with the W and a shot at the bantamweight title here in a couple months.
Yeah.
All right, looking at the main event, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Brandon Halsey is a guy that kind of came out of nowhere and beat Brett Cooper, and then kind of won that makeshift four-man middleweight tournament. He gets a shot at the champion, Alexander Shlemenko, who hadn't lost in a very, very long time, and nobody expected this kid to beat Shlemenko, and he submits him in 37 seconds. And here comes, here comes a guy in Kendall Grove, a guy that pretty much has been a journeyman most of his career. I know he won the Ultimate Fighter season 3. Boy, that was a long, long time ago. And he had some success in the UFC, but nothing, obviously, to the level of, winning the Ultimate Fighter. Never could really ascend past kind of a win-loss kind of guy. And he actually got cut from the UFC back in 2011. Since then, he's fought for, like, Pro Elite, show fights, AFC, KSW, GWC, I don't even know some, and made his Bellator debut in 2013. Since then, he's gone 2-1. His only loss, a knockout loss to Brett Cooper. His other 2 wins over Joe Vedipo and Christian Mpumbu, former Bellator light heavyweight champion. Now getting the shot at Brandon Halsey. I would say standing up, Kendall Grove is probably the better fighter. I think he's probably the better kickboxer. But grappling, I think just with that strength that Halsey possesses here at 185, this dude's his nickname's the Bull, and I think with good reason. This dude is even though 6 foot's not overly tall for middleweight, but he's jacked. This is a guy that has a lot of muscle, and I think if it gets to grappling, Billy, boy, got Dave on the brain. I think Kendall Grove will be outmatched physically, but if it stays standing at range, Kendall Grove has a chance to win this fight.
Yeah, I think Kendall Grove will have enough experience to keep him off and go long enough to edge him out on the feet with a decision there.
And do you think, wouldn't it be crazy if, like, let's just look at the possibilities here, if Kendall Grove wins? How crazy would it be that Kendall Grove gets cut from the UFC, 4 years ago, kind of just fades away, no one remembers him, and all of a sudden becomes a Bellator champion? I know maybe that's not the highest honor in the world, but considering where his career has kind of gone pretty much since winning the Ultimate Fighter, I think that's a huge kind of career achievement for him.
No, yeah, it's still a really good story to go from, like you said, fighting in whatever those leagues are, you don't even know what they're called, half of them, to come back to Bellator, which is a clear second organization, probably up there, and win it. It's impressive. And I think you will.
It should be a good fight. I think people, they're getting really excited about the Shamrock and Kimbo card coming up next month, but I think this is going to be a solid card, and I think, there wasn't a lot of press behind this one. People, like I said, probably have forgot about Kendall Grove. I don't think people remember Halsey's win. Richmond and Dantes, I think, are emerging stars, even though Dantes used to be a champion. I think this is a solid fight and definitely one to tune into on Friday night on Spike TV.
Yeah, I don't think it'll let down. I think both of those fights should end up turning out to be good little stand-up wars.
All right, before we get to UFC Fight Night Adelaide and break down the 4-fight main cards that were shown on the Fight Pass, I want to mention our friends at CombatCardboard.com. They are the MMA Sports Cards Authority, and if you have been thinking about getting into cards, I know Dave and I have shown some of our cards here on the show. if you want to talk about UFC trading cards, you want to see what they're all about, buy, sell, trade, this is the place for you to go. CombatCardboard.com. It's free to sign up. You can interact with other members. You can see their collections. Like I said, you can buy, sell, trade. It's a great place also to discuss MMA cards and obviously MMA in general. They got a lot of cool things going on. As of right now, they're going to be starting an MMA fantasy league coming up this month that you can sign up for. And also this month they're giving away, they're doing a contest, and they're going to give away a actual box of 2014 UFC Topps Bloodlines. A free box. That's about a $130 box of cards. They will give away for free. And how can you get that? Well, if you go on their forum section, you got to be active, commenting on people, discussing MMA cards with people, and MMA in general with people. And if you can end up being the most active member this month on CombatCardboard.com, you can receive a free box of UFC cards. So again, that's CombatCardboard.com. It's free to sign up. And you can also get an extra chance to win if you message the user Fight Hobby. He's the one that runs the site. And if you tell him that you love Beyond the Cage, so all I got to do, tell him, I love Beyond the Cage, send a message to Fight Hobby, you can receive extra consideration for that box of cards. So I just want to let people know. Excuse me. I just want to let people know I have a chance to win some cool stuff from our friends at Combat Cardboard. And also, if you're cruising the site like I am right now, they post our show every week on YouTube. So if you hadn't listened to the show for whatever reason, you're looking on Combat Cardboard, boom, our show is going to be right there. And also they do for every fight, they get a panel of some of the top people in MMA, including myself and Dave, and we get some picks for the main event of each fight card. So there's a lot of cool stuff on there, so you can check that out again at CombatCardboard.com. All right, let's move on to UFC Fight Night Adelaide. 4 fights were shown on the main card on UFC Fight Pass. And besides the main event, this was a pretty quick card, as only 2 fights on the whole entire card went to decision.
Wasn't it really similar to the last Australia card, too?
Yeah, that, I believe, had everyone go to a finish, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was 11 fights. This one, obviously, 10 of 12 did not go to the judges, so pretty amazing. So once again, the Australia cards deliver here on the Fight Pass. Real quickly, I want to mention, of course, our friend Sam Alvey, who we had on before his fight here against Dan Kelly. Boy, he just continues to impress, Billy. I mean, 45 seconds, he took care of Dan Kelly, in his home country. That was awfully impressive.
The perfect performance. You can't do much better. He's on a roll. I'd like to see him get a big fight here soon.
And he got in a little bit of trouble. This is also why I wanted to mention him. If you notice, he had a thing on his chest that said #PerfectTan. Now, apparently, according to the UFC kind of rules and regulations, you cannot have a sponsor on your body. You could have it on your shorts or your shirt or your hat, but you cannot technically have it on your body. And I guess they tried to remove it before the fight and couldn't. It was already kind of like set in like that spray tan there, and they couldn't remove it. So I don't know if he's going to get fined or anything, but Tom Wright, one of the executives for the UFC, especially internationally, talked to Sam Alvey and ensured that it wouldn't happen again. I honestly thought it was a joke. I didn't even realize that was a sponsor. I just thought he was joking around because he's just a pale guy that he would have a perfect tan thing. I didn't know that was an actual sponsor. So to me, I just thought it was a joke because obviously we've had Sam on the show. He likes to joke around. He's a fun guy. And I just thought it was a joke, but I guess it was an actual thing. So I'm sure, I don't think he'll be fine, but I didn't realize that you can have a sponsor on your body.
Yeah, I've seen other fight leagues do it. I've never seen the UFC. I know George St. Pierre did it in one of his fights. I forget where was that. He had like a poker logo on his back, but I hope they don't fine him. They just give him a warning, don't do it again.
Yeah, especially, again, this is pre-Reebok. Post-Reebok, probably a serious offense. You get that muscle farm tattoo right in your chest.
Yeah.
All right, and for his efforts there, somehow, I don't know how this didn't happen, Billy, but he did not get a Performance of the Night award. He got shafted. Mr. Sam Alvey. I'm gonna be
Honestly,
honest. There were some good knockouts and some good performances on this card, but I mean, I don't know. I thought that
I
was
would have
worthy of
given
one.
him, Whitaker, and Miocic would have got it as far as I'm concerned.
How it ended up going, Alex Chambers got one for her submission and kind of comeback victory there over Kylan Curran. Dan Hooker got one for upsetting Hatsu Hioki, which you can kind of get. James Vick, with that comeback guillotine there, we'll talk about here in just a
That was
second.
nice.
And then, of course, Robert Whitaker over Brad Tavares. But I know she got the submission, but Alex Chambers looked awful in that fight. I mean, if you watch that fight, she's getting dominated by Kaylin Curran.
Yeah,
Yeah, she pulls out the submission, but I think what Sam Alvey did was more impressive than what Chambers did.
yeah, I would edge that for
I mean,
sure.
maybe that's semantics, but it also obviously we like Sam Alvey. So,
Yeah, good dude.
all right, let's get to that main card. First fight, as I mentioned, James Vick against Jake Matthews, lightweight division. I'm gonna be honest. Going on kind of the Curran and Chambers, I didn't think James Vick was fighting all that good. I thought Jake Matthews was pushing the pace. He was getting inside. He had that huge slam. I thought his stand-up looked better than James Vick, which I was awfully surprised at. And he had no problem getting inside that long reach of James Vick. It didn't really seem like he had too many problems, and Vick really wasn't doing much to counter anything Matthews was doing. And then kind of there at the end, stuck his head, got the guillotine choke, and got the tap. I hate to say Vic got lucky, to get a win, but yeah, and that he, obviously this was in the first round. Not saying he couldn't have come back in rounds 2 and 3 and had a great performance, but at that point in time, he got a little lucky on that. He was definitely losing that fight, and for Jake Matthews, a young guy, he's just got to learn to, maybe at the end of the round, just maybe back off, maybe not
Yeah,
try so hard for the takedown. That's about the only thing I could really say.
can't make those mistakes. I mean, good on Vic because he found a way to win, but I feel like I don't know if he would have got that 9 times out of 10. It was just a little end of the round thing there.
And for Vic, he stays undefeated. He's had some good performances in Octagon. This one gets the finish. Not an overall great performance, but who would be someone you'd like to see him take on next, Billy?
That's tough. I don't really know. I mean, I'm trying to think who's open right around there. I can't really think of no one off my top that's that good for him. Pull up a list here. Is there anyone you like to see him fight?
Um, I was kind of looking at somebody. You may think it's a step down from Jim Miller, but I honestly think him against Beneil Dariush is a very good matchup just because of the size disparity. Dariush is not out overly big lightweight, and obviously here comes a guy, James Vick, that's like 6'3". I think that's a good contrast to styles. But maybe Dariush is thinking about somebody else, but I think that's actually a pretty solid matchup.
It could be. I want to see Benel Dariush take a fight up, though. He's been on a good little streak. I need to see him take on some higher competition. Like, I want Benel Dariush, to get a top 10 guy. Vic, it's tough, man. It's tough off that performance because I don't know if he's ready to go too far up because he wasn't looking that good. I mean, he got the win, but
Right. Yeah. He could even be in a position where he takes someone off a loss, someone good, but maybe someone like a Gleason Tebow even.
yeah, that'd be a good fight, actually. That'd be nice for him. It's a nice name who's been around for a while.
All right, let's get on to the next fight here in light heavyweight, Sean O'Connell against Anthony Perosh. Boy, I did not see this one coming. I thought Perosh would be able to get inside, get the takedown, work his grappling, get a submission. That was not the case. And Sean O'Connell just was like, you know what? This guy's probably the better grappler than me. I'm just going to throw bombs and see what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if that officially was his game plan, but that's what he did. And it worked out great for him as he was able to get a first-round knockout just 56 seconds into the first round to beat the veteran Aussie there, Perosh. And they mentioned O'Connell, maybe more set for 185, but the fact he moved up, had to go to Australia, take on arguably maybe the longest, fighting Australian in MMA, knock him out in the first round, awfully impressive for Sean O'Connell.
Yeah, it was a nice win. It was either knock him out in that first or have a tight decision, because I don't know if he could have kept doing that much longer. He was throwing everything, but he got him.
Right, and this is a guy, he's fought at 205 every fight so far in the UFC, taking on guys like Ryan Jimmo, Sean Vellante, Matt Van Buren, and now Peroche. But, a guy, like I said, could maybe factor into 185. I think he's coming off a loss, but a guy I think he's very similar to, and maybe they can somehow match this up either at 205 or 185, but Patrick Walsh, a guy who actually fought Dan Kelly not too long ago, that Broomfield card, a guy with good boxing. They kind of look similar too, maybe that's why. But I think that would be a good matchup for both those guys.
Yeah, that'd be a great fight to have.
All right. Now, talk about surprise. It's not surprised that he won, more surprised in how he did it. And that's former Tough Smashes winner Robert Whitaker, who took on the Hawaiian Brad Tavares. And our question coming into this fight when Dave and I were breaking down is, could excuse me, could Whitaker get on the inside of Tavares? That was our big question. And the question was answered very quickly, that yes, he can, and yes, he can hit with power, and yes, that he can do it successfully and get a knockout, as he was able to knock out Brad Tavares in 44 seconds, which, looking over Brad Tavares' career, win or lose, this guy almost always goes to decision. In fact, he's only had 2 fights so far in his UFC tenure, which runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This was his 12th UFC fight, and this is only the 3rd time of those 12 fights, win or lose, that he did not go to a decision. So this is a guy that does not get out of fights early. And Robert Whitaker was basically able to go over to him and just punch him in the face as hard as he could and knock him out in 45 seconds. And this is coming off a great victory over Clint Hester, another big and strong middleweight. And Robert Whitaker has knocked out both these guys now. And we talked about Sam Alvey. I honestly think maybe Robert Whitaker, Sam Alvey would be a great matchup here moving forward.
That'd be a really good fight. Whitaker looked great. He timed that left, I think it was the left, perfectly. Looked right on cue after Kenny Florian said something about it too. But yeah, I think he's got a bright future. He's 24.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna have a future.
Now for Tavares, this is now his 3rd loss in his last 4 fights. Obviously, something has to change for him. I don't know if that's starting quicker. I don't know if that's dropping down a weight class. I don't know if that's throwing harder. I'm not really sure what he has to do, but obviously something has to change, because before this little skid he's had in his last 4 fights, dating back to April of 2014, he had won 5 in a row, including wins over Ricky Fukuda, Tom Watson, and Lorenz Larkin. Those are pretty solid names. And since that, he got beat by Romero, knocked out by Bosch. He did beat Nate Marquardt, but now he gets knocked out in the first round by Robert Whitaker. Obviously, something has to change here for Brad Tavares.
Yeah, I don't really know what it is. It's tough. I mean, Romero, there's not much you can do against a guy like that. Whitaker caught him perfect, so it's hard to pinpoint what to change, because he was having success, but it's tough, man. After a knockout like that, where do you go?
Yeah, he's definitely got some, kind of some soul searching, I think, here to do. Now, they only list him at 6'1". I always thought he was kind of a pretty decent-sized middleweight, so I'm not sure if 170 is really the answer. But I think maybe a change in camp or change in scenery, he has to try something a little different here, I think, moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, he's still a young guy. He's only, 26 years old, or 27 years old.
Two of his last 3 were TKO losses, though. That's tough.
Yeah, and well, in the Bosch one, in his defense, he was winning that fight up until he got caught. If that's any consolation, I mean, that's a fight he was winning.
Mm-hmm.
This one he just kind of got a blitzkrieg.
Yeah, there's not much you can do there. Whitaker was
but again, still something you gotta test for if a guy can kind of just come up, and break right through your reach and defense that quickly, though.
yeah.
All right, last fight. Excuse me. Still a little bit under the weather. Last fight here for UFC Adelaide main event, heavyweight division, Stipe Miocic against Mark Hunt. This was just absolute domination by Stipe Miocic, and Mark Hunt really didn't do anything to stop this. In fact, I don't know if I've ever seen a disparity this wide. It ended in the middle of the 5th round, and I'll put it this way. If you're able to do this to your opponent, this is a good recipe for success. How do you like outstriking your opponent, Billy? 361 to 46.
Yeah.
In fact, and how do you like that? I don't think I've seen this. In the 3rd round alone, he outstruck Mark Hunt 125 to 6.
I wonder what that round was scored.
I mean, I don't know if this was just Stipe just being that good or Mark Hunt being that bad, but whatever the case, Mark Hunt did not show up against Stipe Miocic, and Miocic, I honestly I don't even think this is his best performance in the octagon, to be quite honest. As dominating as it looks, I think he's had better performances. I just think Mark Hunt, I don't know if it was like a hangover from the loss against Verdum, weight cut, or what, but the guy we saw fight Verdum, and even previously against Roy Nelson, and let's go one more fight before that, when he took on Bigfoot Silva, that was not the same guy we saw in Australia.
Yeah, I don't know if it's dropping a knockout for that interim or something that took some motivation out of him, but he definitely didn't look the same. He looked gassed from the start. I mean, looking back at this fight too, I'm a Hunt fan, so I was hoping like, all right, he's standing up. I wish they would have stopped it earlier, probably in that 3rd round for sure. I don't think he needed to take those extra couple rounds of damage.
Yeah, I mean, he got in rounds 4, he got outstruck 62 to 7, and then here's probably, I don't know if I've ever seen this, but he got outstruck 70 to nothing in the 5th round, en route to what eventually was finished at the 247 marker. I mean, he just didn't offer anything to Miocic. Now, Stipe gets the win. He puts himself right back in title contention. Now, he's in an interesting spot because it hasn't been announced, but I gotta believe JDS Overeem happens pretty soon here. My thinking is that the winner of Travis Brown and Arlovski very easily could get a shot at the title, and the winner of Verdum and Velasquez coming up in here in July. That's kind of my feeling. So I think Stipe is either going to face the loser of Overeem JDS or face the loser of Brown or Velasquez. I'm not really sure what other options he really has in terms of taking on a top flight heavyweight.
Yeah, I'd rather see the loser of Overeem JDS for sure too. I mean, nothing against Arlovski. He's making a great comeback. I don't know how that fight with Brown is gonna go, but personally, I think JDS and Overeem are a little above them. Maybe not Brown. He caught Overeem in that fight, but yeah, that division, it's a tough one with all the injuries and being caught up and not many heavyweights in general. I read the other day that there's like 36 heavyweights listed on the roster, and 2 of them were like Shane Carwin and another guy that doesn't fight anymore.
Now, the only other outside chance I see is Frank Mir is set to face Todd Duffy for the San Diego fight. Now, if Frank Mir wins, I still don't think that's an attractive matchup. But if Todd Duffy gets past Frank Mir, Todd Duffy, a guy being 28, 29, Stipe being 32, you can actually say 2 of the younger guys in the heavyweight division. I think if Todd Duffy gets by Frank Mir, I wouldn't mind seeing Duffy against Miocic.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be the best step up, but in that division, that's probably a good fight for him still.
I mean, that's kind of about the best we can get. Like I said, if he doesn't want to, fight the loser of Brown or Velasquez, basically he's going to have to wait, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
At least until, May 23rd, when Arlovski does fight Brown. We'll see how that all plays out, but That's about the earliest to me he would get a potential, new opponent.
Because I think if Overeem beats JDS, if they schedule that, I think they would give him a title shot. So I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
then you could manage to say the winner of Brown Arlovski can fight Stipe, and I'd like that more.
Right. I think it's more if Travis Brown does win and he wins impressively, I think he may be able to get fast tracked just because he hasn't got it. But
Yeah.
if Arlovski win, the fact he's kind of been the champion, big and hanging around, having him fight Miocic to me is not, a negative.
Yeah, it's not bad. But I'd like to see the winner. I'd like to see Stipe get a big fight. Now, I mean, Mark Hunt's coming off that loss to Verdum, which is a huge fight. I don't want to see him take a step too far back.
Now, I guess the interesting thing would be, would Stipe match up against the loser of Velasquez and Verdum?
That's
You
also a
have
good
that.
question.
You also have that out there too. But again, he has to wait till July.
Yeah, that's a while away, but that's also a really good matchup. I think he'd match up great with both of them.
All right. Well, let's.
I don't know if anyone's a good matchup for Kane, but
That's true. All right. Let's get to this weekend. UFC Fight Morning, as they've been saying on the UFC website, as it will start about 10 a.m. Eastern time with the main card, with the early prelims on the Fight Pass starting at 7 a.m. So if you're looking something to do early on Saturday morning, you got UFC fights coming your way on Fox Sports 1 starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. The first fight of the evening will be in the featherweight division, as Mark Avita will take on Levan Matashvili. Boy, I don't know. I'm assuming I said that right. I don't know a lot about these two guys. I'm not going to try to pretend and blow smoke up anyone's here. Looking at Avita and actually Makashvili, they're both listed as 6-1 in their professional careers. Avita is actually from the Philippines. 3 of his 6 career victories are by knockout. He is so far 1-1 in the UFC. His only victory was a win over, speaking of names here, Juma Bike Tuxeron. Boy, that was back in March of last year. In his last fight, he lost to, jeez, these names here, Billy. Edamilicion Souza. He got knocked out in the second round on the Fight Night Miocic Maldonado back in May of last year. So about a year layoff for Avita. So that will be interesting to see how he deals with coming back for the first time in a year. And looking at his opponent in Makashvili, he will be making his UFC debut, as I mentioned, 6-1. He is coming off a 2-fight series against Alexandre Bereza in the cage fighting organization, CFFC, and he beat him by decision back in December of last year. Of his 6 career victories, he has 3 knockouts. Again, not much really to go on between these two guys, but I'm leaning towards the guy from the Philippines just because that's his home country. That's got to give a lot of extra, motivation for him to, perform and win.
yeah, I'm seeing on the site the guy at the United States, they're listing 9-1.
Okay, Sheerdog had him at 6, so they must have added his amateur wins to his record.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie either. I honestly haven't seen him fight. Don't know a lot about him. They don't have much stats on him at all, but they got to be a hometown hero here.
All right, now the next fight, very interesting because it includes a former Ultimate Fighter, but a guy that hasn't been in the UFC for a very long time, and that's Mr. Philippe Nover, as he will take on Yu Chal Nam at 145 pounds. And for those of you who don't remember, Philippe Nover was a guy that he fought on I believe it was season 12, if I'm not mistaken, and he's the one that lost to Efren Escudero, and he's also the guy that passed out the very first episode of that season of The Ultimate Fighter, and he's also a man that Dana White called the next Anderson Silva. And so far has a career record of 10-5-1. He debuted, like I said, he lost to Efren Escudero. Actually, that was season 8 of The Ultimate Fighter. My apologies. Then he lost 2 more fights to Kyle Bradley and Rob Emerson before being cut by the organization. Since leaving, he has fought for Bellator, Ring of Combat, and Dakota Fighting Championships, and has compiled a record of 5-2. Most recently, he has won his last 3 fights, one of those being in Bellator. And of his 10 career victories, 5 are by submission. Obviously, now trying to fight down a weight class. He fought at 155 in the Ultimate Fighter. Now going to try to make a run here at possibly 145. And his opponent here, Yu Chol Nam, also known as the Korean Bulldozer, great name. He is currently riding a 5-fight winning streak. His first fight in the UFC was back in March of last year in the Kim Hathaway card, and he beat Kazuke Tukadome in that fight. So another guy kind of coming off a very long layoff. Nover, his last fight for that Ring of Combat was January of this year. Very interesting to see, Nover back in the UFC, putting him on the main card, and taking a guy who obviously has 1 fight UFC experience. But I'm intrigued just because of, like I said, Nover had such a quick rise there, being called the next Anderson Silva. He was supposed to be the sure thing to win that season, the Ultimate Fighter. It didn't work out that way. His career's gone kind of a completely different path, and now is, given a second chance here. And I don't know. I'm intrigued by this one.
Yeah, on the site they don't even got a picture of Nova up here, so that's not too assuring. But
right, you think they would have had an old stock photo of him, right?
Yeah, but I think he has a lot to prove coming back here, and oh man, these fights are tough to pick because it's a strange card. It's a strange card. Being at 10 a.m., Nover's got to look good on his return.
All right, let's get to the next fight here, which I'm actually really excited for this. At 170 pounds, Hyun-Gyu Lim is taking on Neil Magny. And, of course, Neil Magny has had a lot of success as of late. I believe he's currently riding a 6-fight winning streak, but I will double-check that here. Maybe it's actually 7 fights now. But let me double-check that. Yep, it's 6 fights. His most recent victory, he submitted Kichi Kunimoto back at the Fight Night in Broomfield, Colorado on Valentine's Day. And so far in the UFC, he has compiled a record of 7-2. He has not lost since November of 2013 when he got decision by Seth Baczynski. Since that time, he's beaten some, maybe not the most notable names, but he defeated Tim Means, and also he knocked out William Mercutio. And like I said, in his last fight, he got the finish there of a Kunimoto. Definitely on a great win streak. And, looking at Hyun-Gyu Lim, this dude, I don't know how he makes 170 pounds, to be quite honest with you, Billy. This dude is a monster. So far in the UFC, a record of 3-1. All 3 victories are by knockout. His only loss was a loss to Tariq Saffiedine, which was the main event of the card, and his first time he's ever gone past 3 rounds. And, we're going to see 2 gigantic welterweights go at it in this matchup. And to me, if Magny can get out of the first round, I think he has way better conditioning than Lim, and he's the better grappler. I think can win this fight. But if Neil Magny can't weather that early storm by Lim, I think Lim can actually get a knockout in this fight.
Magny's been on too good of a streak. I don't see much trouble coming from him. Honestly, I wish he would have gotten, for a win streak so big, any other fighter would be getting a lot bigger fights right now. I'm surprised he hasn't been. Not saying that this isn't a tough fight. Every fight's a tough fight. But I think this will be a good fight for him, and I want to see him touching that top 10.
Yeah, if he could yeah, like you said, maybe someone maybe a little more touted, but Lim is a dangerous guy, and if he can take out Lim, especially finish him, because like I said, Tariq Saffiedine beat him, but he didn't finish him. And in fact, Lim has not been finished since 2008, when he got submitted in an angle lock. So it's been almost 7 years since someone has finished Lim. So if he can go in there, obviously, I know Lim's technically from Korea, but you got to believe the fans are going to be more on his side than Neil Magny. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, like I said, every fight's a tough fight. I'm not taking anything away from him, I just think Phil Magny at the streak he's on should be Magny. My words are messed up. He should be touching a lot like top 10 guys right now.
The
But
next
this is
fight,
a tough
oh,
fight,
go
and
ahead.
if he gets by him, I think he will see that finally.
Absolutely. I think regardless of whether he gets a finish or not, 7 in a row,
Yeah, it's
it's kind of
such a
hard to
huge win
deny
streak.
that. All right, our next fight of the evening, 185 pounds. Mark Munoz, the Filipino wrecking machine, will take on the big slow, Luke Burnett. This is kind of Mark Munoz's last chance. If he loses, I think may not only be cut, I think he might retire. Obviously not originally from the Philippines, but obviously the Filipino wrecking machine, very proud of his Filipino heritage. There was no way the UFC, I think, was not going to let him fight on this card. Regardless, he hasn't had the best performances as of late. He is currently on a 3-fight losing streak, has not won since July of 2013, and overall has lost 4 of his last 5 fights. And in the last 3 that he lost, he's got finished in all of them, all in the first round. So Mark Munoz is definitely showing signs of starting to slow down in his career. Now, Luke Barnett's a guy that might be kind of the perfect matchup. He's lost his last 2 fights in the UFC after winning his first 3, and a guy that is not, they call him the big slow for a reason. Guy's not overly fast, he's not overly strong, he's not really a great finisher. He's a guy that kind of plods along. He's a tough guy. He's a great condition, but not a guy that really goes in there and is very explosive. And if you look at the guys that Munoz has lost to, those are guys that can be explosive. That's not Luke Barnett. So this is a fight I think Munoz can win, but a fight Munoz has to get to the ground. I think if he's really going to stand and kind of plod along with Luke Barnett, I think Luke Barnett's going to get a decision. But if Mark Munoz can get this fight to the ground, get on top, and land ground and pound like he's capable of, he can very easily win this fight.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think he did announce that this was his last fight. I'm not sure, so I could sound crazy. I think he sold his gym, and this is his last fight. I think he's really just going to go out there and put everything out there for his fans and make it one big last hurrah.
Yes, I know he did. He did sell his gym, but I wasn't sure if he was actually calling it quits. But yeah, like I said, either way, probably his last fight. Like I said, the UFC cuts him or he retires. But yeah, this is a perfect guy for Mark Munoz, I think, to try to end the skid and go out on top on.
I think that's sort of his fight for that.
All right, let's look at the co-main event of the evening, a fight that I'm actually really excited for, and that is Gegard Mousasi, former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion. He will be taking on Costa Falopu. Now, Falopu, after a really kind of quick rise there, having a 5-fight winning streak, has kind of been down as of late, losing his last couple, and I think he also had some injury problems in the wake there that has kind of kept him out of action. In fact, he has not fought since May of last year when he knocked out Lorenz Larkin in the first round, and that came after losing 2 fights in a row to Luke Rockhold and Francis Carmel. So obviously injury problems kind of kept him away. A guy that is a very dangerous boxer, a guy that has a very good takedown defense, and looking at Gegard Mousasi, obviously we know, great kickboxer. He also has very good submissions. He's not afraid to be on his back, and a guy that kind of has cerebral power when you look at him. He's not the biggest guy. He's pretty quick, but a guy that is just dead accurate, and that's how he gets you with knockouts. So if Falopu leaves an opening, Mousasi can find it. The interesting thing to me is if it does go to the ground, because I think Mousasi has a decisive advantage in the submission game. Now, Mousasi's not a great wrestler. I think he will have a trouble trying to take down Costa Falopu, but something in a scramble or whatnot, Mousasi could very easily catch him a submission, and I think that's kind of the X factor. So I think standing up, they're not that much different than each other, but like I said, I think that X factor, the fact that Mousasi has the ability to finish on the ground, I think makes him all the more dangerous in this fight.
I think that's exactly how this fight will finish. I think Costa's really good, but I think Mousasi will find an opening on the feet, and he'll kind of catch him, not nothing crazy, and end up in a scramble and submit him. I think Musazi's finally starting to show that potential that everyone thought when he sort of came in. Like, as for Costas, he's had a lot of injuries, not the best looking lately. I don't know where he really goes, but I think Musazi's going to start showing that potential everyone hoped for, and he'll finish.
The main event of the evening is at 145 pounds. Is former UFC 155 champion will take on former WEC 145 champion, and that's Frankie Edgar against Uriah Faber. Looking at Frankie Edgar, since dropping down to 145, he is 3-1, winning his last 3 fights, his last 2 by finish, defeating BJ Penn, and then having that late finish, submitting Cub Swanson back in November. 18-4-1 overall for Mr. Edgar, with 9 of his 18 career victories coming by decision. Now, looking at Uriah Faber, he has not fought at 145 pounds since Jose Aldo back in 2010. That was April. So it's been roughly 5 years since he has fought at 145 pounds. At 135 pounds, between the WEC and the UFC, he has compiled a record of 9-3, including 2 shots at the bantamweight. Well, 3 shots technically at the bantamweight title. Losing those are his only 3 losses. Currently riding a 2-fight winning streak as he submitted Alex Caceres and Francisco Rivera most recently. 32-7 of his 32 victories, 19 are by submission. Now, Faber, to me, his best chance to win is on the feet. I think that speed-wise, he can match Frankie Edgar with hand speed, footwork, and obviously conditioning, not having to cut that extra 10 pounds. I think he can match Edgar that way. But when it comes to grappling, Faber does have a strong wrestling base. I think the fact that Edgar is so used to dealing with bigger guys and has had success not only taking down bigger guys but stopping takedowns from bigger guys, I think that's the advantage he has, is that kind of wrestling game. And I think he can take down Uriah Faber. I think he can get on top, and I think he can win that way. I don't think he can submit Uriah Faber. More likely he gets the decision, maybe knocks him out. But I think Frankie Edgar, I think we'll find out rather quickly he doesn't want to stand with Uriah Faber. I think that is a lot more even matchup, and I think has to push this thing grappling-wise, and that's something that I think he's very capable of doing, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that early and often, him trying to shoot in and go for Faber that way.
Yeah, I don't see either of these guys submitting each other. I think they're both really sound there, but I think Edgar will have the edge on the feet only because he's going to threaten that wrestling so much and leave himself available for those opportunities. I think Faber's been sort of plateauing. I think when Edgar shoots, he'll shoot a couple early takedowns to get him worried and then get his boxing going. But Faber's one of those guys you can't bet against him either. Like, neither of these, they only lose the highest level of fight. So that's why this fight is so exciting.
And the X factor to me, I guess, would be the power of Faber, or the power of because moving up a weight class again, he's always been in great shape. So I have no doubts about him in shape, but being up that 10 pounds, maybe have more room to kind of throw with a little more reckless abandon than maybe he would at 135.
Yeah, he'll definitely have a lot more energy, and it's not like he's fighting a way bigger guy because Edgar's so small as it is to begin with. So it'll definitely be a better fight for Faber, I think, or he'll look better than have to make that cut to 35.
All right, well, with that said, let's get to picks. UFC Fight Night Manilla, 6 fights here on the main card. First fight of the evening, 145 pounds. Levon Makashvili against Mark Avita. Again, as I said, I don't know a lot about either guys, but I'll go with the man with the from the Philippines here. Despite a long layoff here, Billy, I'm gonna go with Mark Avita to win this one.
I'm gonna take the Hornet here. I think don't know a lot about him. 9-1. I think he'll come in and try and make a statement.
All right, Philippe Nover against Yu Chal Nam, the Korean bulldozer, in the next matchup. I'm gonna go with Philippe Nover. I think that this is a guy that's kind of been waiting a long time coming for his re-return to the UFC, and for Nam, obviously I think he can win, but a guy that's been on a long layoff, probably taking on the best guy he's ever fought in his career, to be quite honest, in Nover. So I'm going to go with Nover in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nover knows this is probably his last shot to show his full potential, and he'll go out there and give it. So I think Nover takes it.
At 170 pounds, Hyun-Gyu Lim against Neil Magny. I think this is going to be a really good fight, but I just like the conditioning and just overall technique of Neil Magny, so I'm going to pick him for the win.
Yeah, I think it'll be a tough first round. I think Magny will actually pull away and finish around the third.
Mark Munoz against Luke Barnett in the middleweight division for the next fight of the evening. As we kind of alluded to, this is probably Mark Munoz's swan song here in the UFC. And I think he got a perfect matchup to get a win here, a guy that's not too explosive or overly strong or overly a great finisher. So while I think Luke Barnett has a chance to win, a guy that I still think is an up-and-coming middleweight, I just think that this is Mark Munoz's time, and I think he's going to go out on top here.
Yeah, I agree. Munoz, this is a perfect fight for him to go out on, where he can really just go out there and give the fans a good fight. I don't know if he'll go to his wrestling or not, but I think Munoz takes it.
Gegard Mousasi against Costa Falopu in the middleweight division in the co-main event of the evening. I think this is going to be a fun fight. I think it's going to be an entertaining fight. But like I said in the breakdown, I think Gegard Mousasi has more tools to finish the fight. So I'm going to go with the man originally from Iran in Gegard Mousasi.
Yeah, I think Mousasi submits him around the third. Catch him on the feet and find a submission.
Main event of the evening, Frankie Edgar against Uriah Faber at 145 pounds. I really think this is going to be a close fight. I think this is a really big fight. I don't know if I could headline a pay-per-view or anything, but this is definitely a really big fight, and I think the fans in Manila are in for a treat here for this main event. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes all 25 minutes. These are two guys that are tough to finish and just so good competitors. So they're so great competitors, and man, got to go with Frankie Edgar though. I just think that his experience taking on bigger guys, even though he's not a huge guy himself, Faber's fought 145 pounds. I just think that little advantage there, Billy, to me is enough X factor to go with the man from New Jersey.
Yeah, out of all the fights announced right now, I will say this is one of my favorite matchups. I think this fight's going to be a classic either way. I think the X factor really will be Frankie's heart, and I think Frankie will take it in a decision, but it'll be a war.
All right, Billy, thank you for filling in here for Dave. We'll probably have you on again soon to maybe be a third man or fill in for Dave again. And is there anything you wanted to say before we end the show?
Nothing much. Just appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and look forward to these good fights.
All right, and what's your Twitter handle again? Is at WBrant21?
Yes, sir.
All right, you can follow him on Twitter as well. I'm on Twitter at Jim Gramm. Again, we want to give a shout out to our friends at combatcardboard.com. Again, go fill out a membership, be active. You can win a chance at 2014 UFC Bloodlines cards. That's a great prize. Also want to thank our friends at MMAforlife.ca, MMAinsider.net, VigilanteMMA.com, and of course, the great AJ Hiller, MMASignaturesUSA.com, the best place in the world to get authentic MMA memorabilia. So for Billy Brant, I am Jim Gramm, and thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.